40 years ago, an American teenager was found bludgeoned to death in a cemetery in New Jersey. Her face was so badly injured that it was impossible to identify her at the time. The American public began to refer to her as Princess Doe, the Jane Doe who had died too young. For 4 decades, her real name has been a mystery until now. Hi and welcome to Mysterious 7. I'm Michael, and today's episode, I'm going to take you guys through the story of how Princess Doe was killed, how her identity was revealed, and how her killer was finally caught. Let's get right into it. Princess Doe was a previously unidentified American teenager from West Babylon, New York. She was found murdered in Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown, New Jersey on July 15, 1982. Her face had been bludgeoned beyond recognition. Her case gained national attention, and the public took a special interest in unraveling her story and finding answers. Thursday, July 15, 1982 at around 8 a.m., gravedigger George Keyes discovered the body of a young girl in the rear section of the Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown, New Jersey. The body was found lying on its back just over a steep bank that leads to a creek below. The victim's face had been beaten beyond recognition with a yet-to-be-determined object. Due to the significant decomposition of her body, even her eye color could not be confirmed. The young girl was dressed in a red short-sleeve shirt. A peasant-style skirt was found lying on top of the victim's legs. No footwear or undergarments were found. No conclusive evidence was found, but this was difficult to determine because of how much the body was decayed. A golden cross necklace was found tangled in the victim's hair. 2 earrings were found in her left ear. Red nail polish was found on the right hand only, and she had no surgical scars, distinct birthmarks, or tattoos. Scars or marks on the head or face area could not be known due to the condition of the body. Forensic anthropologists determined that the victim was not pregnant and had never given birth, and was most likely between the ages of 18 and 14 years old at the time of her death. Toxicology did not reveal any traces of drugs, but was not entirely conclusive because of the time elapsed between the death and the discovery of the body. It is believed that the body was discovered after 2 to 3 days or possibly even weeks of exposure to the elements. This was especially difficult to determine because of the hot and humid weather in the area at that time. The forensic examination indicated that the girl had attempted to fight back or defend herself from her attacker, as injuries indicating trauma to her hands and arms were visible. The girl's body was buried in the Cedar Ridge Cemetery, not far from where she was discovered in January 1983. Donated funds were used to pay for the victim's coffin and headstone. The headstone was engraved with the text, "Princess Doe, missing from home, dead among strangers, remembered by all." For many years, Princess Doe was thought to be Diane Janiskai, a missing teenager from San Jose, California who vanished on July 30, 1979. This theory was propagated by several law enforcement officials in the state of New Jersey, who went as far as to hold a press conference identifying Diane Dye as Princess Doe. However, Lieutenant Eric Krantz, the Princess Doe case's original lead investigator, maintained that Diane Dye was not a viable candidate for Princess Doe's identity. Krantz's feelings were shared by Diane's family and investigators in California, who were particularly angered by the conduct of the New Jersey law enforcement. In February 2003, Princess Doe's DNA was compared with the DNA sample from Diane's mother, Patricia, and it was conclusively determined that Princess Doe was not Diane Dye. After seeing images of the girl's clothing in the newspaper, a witness named Anne-Marie Latimer reported to officials that she remembered seeing a girl wearing the same clothing as Princess Doe purchasing cigarettes on July 13, 1982, just 2 days before her body was found. Latimer stated that she was shopping with her daughter at a supermarket across from the cemetery and observed and was able to describe the victim's clothing. The shirt and skirt themselves were traced to a manufacturer in the Midwestern United States, although the brand labels were missing. 3 people reported after viewing the photos that they had bought similar clothes at a Long Island store, which is now closed. On September 22, 1999, the body of Princess Doe was exhumed from the Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown so that DNA samples could be taken. The body was reburied in the same location. After a 2012 photo composite of the victim was released, it generated new tips as it resembled several missing girls from across the country. One theory was submitted that Princess Doe may have been a runaway and could have been an individual using false names while employed at a hotel in Ocean City, Maryland. In February 2012, a sample of her hair and a tooth were examined through isotope analysis and indicated that the victim was most likely born in the United States, at least 7 to 10 months in the Midwestern or Northeastern United States. The tooth sample indicated she could be from Arizona. It is also believed that the girl had spent a long time in Long Island, New York. Lieutenant Krams, now retired, toying the name Princess Doe early in the investigations and also managed to get the case covered extensively in the media. The case was used as the impetus for recording unidentified crime victims in the MCIC database at the national level. Princess Doe became the first such case entered by the FBI director. After extensive print media coverage in 1982, Lieutenant Krams, who was the original lead investigator from the Blairstown Police Department, was contacted by HBO regarding the Princess Doe case and asked if the channel could chronicle the case in an upcoming documentary entitled Missing. Krantz agreed, and the segment was filmed over several weeks. Krantz was shown following leads as they came in. The documentary featured actual footage of the recovery of Princess Doe's body, along with footage shot by HBO of Princess Doe's 1983 funeral. The case was also featured on America's Most Wanted in February 2012 in hopes of generating new information about the case. The same year, the most recent reconstruction was broadcast on CNN. On July 15, 2012, a memorial service was held for the 30th anniversary of Princess Doe being discovered at the top of the ravine where her remains were found. Over 100 citizens attended, as well as several reporters and cameras. The victim's clothing as well as her photo reconstructions were on display for public viewing. On October 12, 2014, Princess Doe was honored at a missing persons rally in the area. In the years between the first discovery in the body and the final identification, several theories cropped up. The first one was that Princess Doe was actually Diane Dye, a young girl missing from California, which has now been definitively disproved. Secondly, the killer of Princess Doe was already imprisoned for another homicide. A man called John Rees was briefly suspected as he was convicted of killing another woman in nearby Belvedere, New Jersey, but there was no real evidence of a connection with Princess Doe. The third theory was that Princess Doe was either a runaway that was known to work in the Ocean City, Maryland area or a prostitute who worked at the local truck stop. The information for these two possibilities was highly inconclusive. Nobody from the local area came forward to identify Princess Doe on or off the record. It seems unlikely that not one single person would come forward if she was known in the area. The fourth and disturbing theory was that Princess Doe was killed by a Blairstown police officer, and that is why the case was never solved. But this claim is completely unsubstantiated. There are retired local law enforcement officers who still follow and contribute to the case even after 40 years. The fifth theory was that Princess Doe was a victim of a serial killer known to operate in the area, such as John Cleiss, Henry Lee Lucas, or Joel Rifkin. Though local law enforcement was aware of these claims, none were found to be credible. A sixth theory was that Princess Doe was an out-of-state teenager who worked at an area camp. Again, this was never proven. And now we come to the seventh theory, that Princess Doe was killed by a man named Arthur Kinlaw. For many years, this was the most current theory. Many of the facts fit the case, and this theory was explored on the America's Most Wanted website. Several New York Newsday articles referenced this theory that was published in 1999 and February. Mr. Kinlaw was already imprisoned for other crimes. But since Princess Doe's body wasn't identified, his involvement in her murder could not be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Princess Doe's body was re-exhumed in November 2020 using a grant, and she underwent DNA extraction for genetic genealogy. In May 2021, investigators were notified by the NCMEC or National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who were collaborating with Astria Forensics about obtaining DNA markers from degraded samples of Princess Doe's body using a grant. On June 18, 2021, investigators received the news that Astria Forensics agreed to extract DNA and construct a DNA profile. On February 10, 2022, Astria Forensics relayed to investigators that the creation of a DNA data file was successful. The results were sent to the NCMEC's consulting genealogist from Innovative Forensics Investigations. The managing officer was Jennifer Moore, who agreed to perform unlimited genealogy testing free of charge. On February 22, 2022, Innovative Forensics announced to investigators that they had found a candidate for Princess Doe. Investigators went to West Battle on New York where they met Robert Olenek Jr., Princess Doe's brother. They also collected a DNA sample from Princess Doe's sister, which mitotyping technology used to build a mitochondrial DNA profile. The Union County Prosecutor's Office Forensic Laboratory assisted by creating an STR-DNA profile through the victim's sister's DNA sample. Mitotyping technology sent their results to the Union County Prosecutor's Office Forensic Laboratory, then sent both the mitochondrial DNA and STR-DNA profiles through the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification. On April 29, 2022, The center identified Princess Doe as Dawn Olenek. Her identity was formally announced on July 15, 2022, the 40th anniversary of her discovery. Robert Olenek Jr. said that Olenek left their home at her mother's request, and she was never seen or heard from again. Way back in 1999, evidence came to light that Arthur and Donna Kinlaw may have been involved in Princess Doe's murder. Donna was arrested in California for attempting to commit welfare fraud by using the name Eliana, which was traced to a Long Island native. When the police questioned her, she gave them details about the murder of Linda, and her testimony put the Kinlaws behind bars. Donna gave details about 2 murders Arthur had committed of 2 other female victims who remain unidentified today. After Arthur was faced with a death sentence, Donna told authorities that Kinlaw had killed another woman, a sex worker, earlier in 1982. She told police that she was with Arthur in the cemetery and witnessed him commit the murder. Another report states that Donna Kinlaw said that in July 1982, her husband brought home a teenage girl, left home, and returned without her. He later apparently disposed of his clothing and cleaned his vehicle. Afterward, he threatened his wife, claiming if she did not attend her job, he would take her life as he did to the girl he brought home. However, a lack of cooperation meant that Arthur Kinlaw was not charged. Lieutenant Stephen Spears, who worked on the case as a member of the Warren County Prosecutor's Office, from which he is now retired, stated that Kinlaw claimed responsibility for her death, but I have no physical evidence to confirm that. And without the identity of Princess Doe, I have no way of connecting the dots, so to speak, putting her in a place where he could have been or would have been at the same time. Spears also reported that he doubted the confession because the Kinlaws could not provide a name for Princess Doe, even though they claimed to have been with her for some time. Even though he questioned the credibility of their statements, Spears does not believe the victim was native to Long Island, New York. However, Donna Kinlaw was interviewed by a forensic artist who created a sketch of the girl she claimed to have met, which does resemble the most recent composite. Arthur Kinlaw remained incarcerated for 2 counts of second-degree murder. Following the 2022 investigation of Princess Doe as Dawn Olenek, Arthur Kinlaw was reconsidered as a suspect and later charged with Olenek's murder. Dawn Olenek was born on August 5, 1964. She had been a junior at Connequot High School in Bohemia, New York, where she had lived with her mother and sister, authorities said, but she soon moved out of the family home. According to her brother, she was thrown out of her home by her mom. She ended up getting killed in a cemetery, leaving no clue as to her real identity. But for more than 20 years, the name of her suspected killer was no secret. In 1999, the wife of Arthur Kinlaw, the convicted pimp who today is serving time for the murder of many other Long Island women, tied her husband not only to those deaths, but to the brutal slaying of the girl in the Blairstown Cemetery. In an interview with Newsday at the time, Donna Kinlaw recounted how her husband in the summer of 1982 brought a girl of about 18 years old back to their Central Islip home. She told the newspaper as well as police that her husband left with the woman, but later returned home alone, appearing shaken. About 2 weeks later, according to Newsday, she read that police in Belvedere, New Jersey had found the body of a dead girl who fit the description of the girl who was in their house that night. He kept saying, "What does it say? What does it say? Does it say who the person was who got killed?" she said her husband asked. From the story she read aloud to her husband, Donna Kinlaw told Newsday that she remembered that the New Jersey police named the dead girl Princess Jane Doe. Not long afterward, investigators exhumed her body to recover the murder victim's femur bone in hopes of using her DNA to identify her. And in fact, investigators acknowledged that Arthur Kinlaw confessed to the New Jersey murder in written statements dating back to February 2005. But it was not until April of this year that Dawn Olenek was positively identified. Arthur Kinlaw, now 68, is currently imprisoned in Sullivan County, New York on 2 other first-degree murder convictions from February. Among them was a teenager he knew only as Linda in April 1984 in the Bronx, Newsday reported. "I strangled her with my hand," said Kinlaw. "She was hit about the head by me with a bat." Arthur Kinlaw has now been charged with 1 count of homicide as the result of the subsequent investigation, witness statements, and his confession of Olenek's murder. It is believed that after Dawn Olenek refused his demands to go into prostitution, he drove her to New Jersey. They both ended up in Blairstown, where Kinlaw murdered her in the Cedar Ridge Cemetery. Neither Olenek nor Kinlaw had a connection with the town. Kinlaw remains imprisoned at the Sullivan Correctional Facility in Fallsburg, New York. Investigators are now looking to piece together Dawn Olenek's movements in the time leading up to her death. The DNA Doe Project, also DNA Doe Project Incorporated or DDP, is an American non-profit volunteer organization formed to identify unidentified deceased persons, more commonly known as John or Jane Doe, by using forensic genealogy. Their volunteers identified victims of automobile accidents, homicides, and unusual circumstances, such as persons who committed suicide under an alias. The group was founded in February 2017 by Colleen Fitzpatrick and Margaret Press. Unraveling the mystery of Princess Doe has been a sensational success for genealogical DNA testing of exactly this kind. Sometimes the smallest things make the biggest impact. And for the case of Princess Doe, that was exactly what happened. A molar root weighing just 200 kilograms would hold the answers that had eluded investigators for close to 40 years. With the help of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Princess Doe's Mueller and eyelash were submitted to Astria Forensics in 2021 for possible DNA extraction. What is so special about Astria is that they can extract DNA from samples that are degraded or otherwise would provide no value, said Carol Schweitzer, a forensic supervisor at NCMEC. We knew that if anyone could get the information that was needed, Astria could, and they did. Kelly Kincaid, CEO of Astria Forensics, told NCMEC that they were lucky to find that the DNA was exceptionally well preserved and allowed for millions of pieces of information to be gathered to complete the DNA profile. This single DNA extract contained hundreds of millions of unique human DNA fragments, said Kelly. With these sequencing data, we were able to reconstruct her whole genome single nucleotide polymorphisms or SNP profile. This resulted in Astria being able to deliver genotype files to NCMEC and the Warren County Prosecutor's Office that could go on and be used to complete Princess Doe's genealogy. This technology that would not have been possible 40 years ago was just the break the investigators had been hoping for to identify Princess Doe's identity. Once Astria finished the sequencing, Innovative Forensic Investigations, or IFI, started to work on investigative genetic genealogy techniques to build a family tree that would ultimately lead to the true identity of Princess Doe, or who we now know as Dawn Olenek. This work was only possible because of the collaborative effort of each agency, said Jennifer Moore, CEO of IFI. Our team brings forward a diverse set of skills that allows us to help find answers to cases. Echoing Moore's sentiment in today's press conference, Prosecutor Pfeiffer reiterated that science and technology made the impossible possible in this case. Dawn's case was deeply personal for the investigators involved, and their push for answers and justice never wavered. Dawn's family expressed deep gratitude to everyone who worked to find answers in Dawn's case. This is a very big deal for my family, said Dawn's cousin. I'd like to thank Blair staff for treating my cousin like she was one of their own. Touches our family deeply. My cousin is always in my heart, he said while tapping the photo of Dawn pinned to his chest. Blairstown. David Tarawona gave up. We were greatly appreciative of that. Since Princess Doe was the first unidentified persons case to be entered into NCIC, the National Crime Information Center, by the director of the FBI, William Webster, on June 30, 1983, this was a historic moment for missing and unidentified persons that has continued to play a crucial role in investigations since. The entry in NCIC has remained current and alive until today, when she will be removed. The tenacity of law enforcement has never stopped, and they continue to pour resources and new technology into solving this case. And it's thanks to the collaboration between police authorities and genealogical DNA testing experts that Princess Doe was publicly identified on the 40th anniversary of the discovery of her body as Dawn Olenek. So what do you guys think about this 40-year-old case finally getting resolved? Do you still have any theories about Princess Doe? Let us know in the comments section. Mojave County is the second largest county in the state of Arizona, with its first inhabitants being the Mojave people. In the 1860s, Mojave County became known as a booming gold mining area and was used as a recreation town by miners and soldiers. But as industry developed, people began to move further away. The Great Depression brought with it a renewed interest in the gold rush. These days, Mojave has become a booming tourist destination, as many flock to the national parks, and use the area as a quick access route to the Grand Canyon, Route 66, and Hoover Dam. But half a century ago, Mojave County was the scene for a murder mystery that still haunts the sheriff's department to this day. On January 23, 1971, a group of 3 hunters were looking for game in a remote desert area in Mojave County, Arizona, when they came upon a canvas sack abandoned in the desert. The sack was loosely tied with a white cotton rope and left along the Hackberry gravel road in the isolated desert. It bore the words, "Dear Pack Ames Harris Navilco," printed on the side in green. Assuming it was an animal carcass left behind by another group of hunters, they opened the sack to investigate. To their shock and horror, they found the contorted body of a woman. The police were called to the scene immediately, and they sealed off the area to begin their investigation. It was obvious to investigators that they were dealing with a homicide. Whoever wrapped the victim up in the sack was clearly trying to hide the body. It was also clear that the woman had been murdered elsewhere and her remains unceremoniously dumped in the desert, 2 miles from the US 93 highway near Kingman in Arizona. It was becoming apparent that the case was going to be an uphill challenge for investigators, and firstly, they needed to determine who the victim was, and secondly, where the actual crime took place. Having canvassed the immediate area for any clues or possible belongings of the victim, investigators came up empty-handed. No identification, no bag, and no purse were found anywhere near the crime scene. It seemed like whoever killed her had made sure not to leave any incriminating clues behind and made a clean getaway. Investigators sent her body away to the Mojave County Coroner's Office for a post-mortem, while they continued to question the hunters about any suspicious activity in the area. It was obvious from the beginning that the woman was a victim of homicide, as she had been stuffed into a canvas sack. Her cause of death, though, baffled investigators. Although her neck was broken, decomposition had already set in, making it difficult to determine if there were any ligature marks around her neck. It was initially listed as unknown, as she showed no signs of blunt force trauma or gunshot wounds. There were also no signs of a health-related death, such as a stroke or a heart attack, and her organs were listed as healthy. Toxicology reports also suggested no drugs or alcohol in her system that may have led to an accidental overdose. Much later in the investigation, the cause of death status was changed to strangulation, based on the theory that she may have been murdered by someone she knew personally, perhaps a lover or spouse. It was also difficult to pinpoint the time of death, as her body had been partially frozen, but they estimate that she could have been killed any time between December 1st and 31st, 1970, toward the end of bow hunting season. They began working on creating a workable profile for investigators to use to solve the mystery. It was determined that the victim was a white female, aged between 35 to 40 years old. Her height was estimated at 5 foot 4 inches, and her weight between 125 and 140 pounds. Her hair was brownish black and short with curls. Examiners added that she had scarring on her abdomen, consistent with the cesarean section birth, and internal signs indicated she may have been a mother of 3 children. They determined she may have been married, as a bone indentation was visible on her left ring, showing that she had once used a wedding band, but no jewelry was found on her body. She did not smoke, and lima beans were discovered in her digestive system as the last meal she had eaten. Her clothes were added to the description and included a multicolored size 14 blouse with 5 brass buttons and the paulets, and a long-sleeve black cardigan. She wore size 12 burnt orange stretch pants, with the label "Symphony is What's Happening" stitched on the inside. On her feet were pixie-style black leather boots that were a size 5.5, and bobby socks that were possibly white at some point. Her hair was described as being salon-styled, and her appearance clean and meticulous. Her nails were evenly manicured and clean. What stood out was the extensive dental work she had done. She was missing 2 molars and had a $500 Maryland bridge for dental implants fitted in. It was estimated she had work done on her teeth to the value of almost $2,100. She was given the placeholder name, the Mojave Jane Doe, and kept at the county mortuary until her identity could be determined. A composite drawing was made of the Jane Doe by a Flagstaff police sketch artist, but it remained businesslike and unflattering. This was given to investigators, along with the descriptions from the medical examiner. Using this information, investigators worked tirelessly to identify the woman. The first thing the investigators did was place a report in both the local and national papers with the description, composite sketch, and area the victim was found. It did not seem to bring in any promising leads, so they turned their attention to other methods of identification. Given that she seemed to be well-groomed, without any signs of neglect, investigators canvassed motels, hotels, and local stores in the area that catered to the upper middle class. Although they questioned people extensively, no one could remember such a woman crossing their paths. Investigators then looked at her clothing and tried to determine from where she had bought her clothes. A visit to all possible clothing outlets produced negative results. Investigators then turned to airports and conducted searches of flight manifestos, questioning staff about any person who had not been accounted for on any flight and followed up with those leads. This too led nowhere. Next, investigators took to placing a missing persons advert in dental magazines, explaining the scope of the work she had done on her teeth. This, they hoped, would jog the memory of the dentist who performed the surgeries, and they would come forward with her identity. When this option failed, they went through the filing system of a dentist lab in Phoenix, Arizona. After searching through files of over 8,000 patients, they had still come up short. Investigators widened their nets and set out the missing persons bulletin to Arizona, California, Nevada, and Utah. 23 women had been reported missing during that time period, but all were eventually found alive. The Jane Doe, however, was not among any of those reported missing. Investigators made a request for the fingerprints that were taken for record purposes during the autopsy. These were then sent off to the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Washington to be checked against the national database COIDUS. But still there was no trace of her on any system, missing or criminal. Investigators eventually turned to looking for a suspect among the hunting community, especially those who applied for hunting licenses during that particular season. Over 5,000 applications had been made, and each and every person was tracked down and questioned. Sheriff Floyd Sisney, Sergeant Don Parrish, and Detective Joe Chapin surmised that their Jane Doe may have been murdered by a spouse. Each applicant who was married was asked to produce their wife for questioning. This too ended up producing no results. The three men strongly believed that the murder was what they called a mama-papa killing, by an enraged husband. In speaking with local reporters, Sisney said he believed that eventually her identity would be revealed, as she may have children according to the autopsy reports, and somewhere out there, her children are missing their mother and being stalled by their father in search for her. But they'll start worrying before long. Time has a habit of solving murder mysteries, he said. The extensive investigation had covered every possible avenue, but investigators remained hopeful. Said Sisney, "We're still no closer to finding this woman's identity. But somebody out there must have seen her, may even know her, or may remember a small thing that could help us." Although the search for the identity of the Mojave Jane Doe continued in earnest with nationwide interest, no new leads developed. Given all the clues and descriptions, no one ever came forward to claim the victim or report her missing. After 3 months of waiting, authorities eventually buried the Mojave Jane Doe at the Mountain View Cemetery in Kingman, a county cemetery used by the Department for Unclaimed Bodies within Mojave County. Her headstone was simply marked Jane Doe, with her date of death as January 29, 1971. Months turned to years, then to decades. 30 years later, in 2001, Lori Miller, an investigator for the Special Investigation Unit SIU, was given the task of identifying the Mojave Jane Doe. The SIU was formed in 1999 as a part of the Mojave County Sheriff's Department initiative to investigate, solve, and eventually close cold cases that had been piling up over the years. By that year alone, there were over 60 unsolved cases, the oldest being the Mojave Jane Doe. It was a painstaking process for Miller and her team as they began the investigation. Like their predecessors, Miller, along with several other investigators, reviewed old case files and reports. They re-interviewed possible witnesses, hoping to refresh their memories and maybe pick up some new information and clues. They resubmitted the fingerprints and once again went back to the dental records to find the dentist possible for working on the Jane Doe. But it didn't produce the desired results. Miller and her team also reached out to an artist from the Museum of Northern Arizona, to a composite of the Jane Doe based on the features of her skull taken from the post-mortem examination pictures. They believe the new artist may be able to highlight the victim's features in a more professional way that would possibly catch the attention of someone who knew her. Once again, they used the national media to bring awareness to the case in the hopes that maybe one of the Jane Doe's children or family members may come forward after having not heard from them 3 decades. Again, they had no luck. Miller's investigative team also tried to find links to the company that produced the sack the victim had been found in, but discovered they had long since been bought out. Over the next 20 years, Miller and her team worked through the case periodically. They kept a watchful eye on databases and followed any and every tip and lead. If anything, their Jane Doe was the proverbial needle in the haystack. Investigators led by Miller also attempted to track down the make of the victim's clothes, but too many years had passed and the fashion range had all but disappeared. In November 2021, the case was officially registered to the NAMAS database, but still there were no positive results. Again, investigators found themselves at a dead end with all leads exhausted. However, as a part of their ongoing case review, the Sheriff's Department continued to update their Facebook post regarding missing or unidentified persons. 51 years later, after the Mojave Jane Doe was discovered, they were contacted by Othram Incorporated, a forensic genealogy company based in Texas, on their Facebook page. The company offered to use the new DNA technology being developed by geneticists to try and create a family tree based on their Jane Doe's DNA profile. But it would take time and money as the technology was new and expensive to carry out. Before that though, investigators tried one more time to post the composite sketch on their Facebook page, hoping to find some tangible leads, but nothing worked out. Miller and her team had realized that there was only one way left. So basically, all we had left was to try to identify her through genetic genealogy, she said. For the investigation team, the case became personal. She was someone's wife, daughter, or mother, and was possible she was missed. Over the years, the investigation continued to lodge evidence with no results. It became part of their mantra to close the Mojave Jane Doe case and bring closure not only to the family, but for those voiceless victims as well. It was with a fervent prayer that the investigators went ahead with the genetic testing option. The was overwhelming. The story of the Mojave Jane Doe touched so many that within 5 days of starting the page, the remaining funds were raised and the testing could begin. The first thing investigators needed to do was exhume the remains of Mojave Jane Doe after being given the green light by the Mojave County Court in November 2022. Excavation of the burial site began. Although the remains were in poor condition due to age, scientists were able to retrieve enough genetic material to perform the testing. The body was reburied as Othram Inc. prepared to begin the testing process. The technology was new and the process was long. It was trusted though, as genetic genealogy tested had become popular in 2018 after it helped track down the Golden State Killer. After more than 40 years using advanced DNA testing, the forensic-grade genome sequencing investigators were able to create a DNA profile. This profile was then used to match against ancestry websites that have profiles from thousands of people who have willingly donated their DNA samples in order to trace and track families from around the world. Investigators were able to create several family trees based on the Mojave Jane Doe's DNA profile. Spending countless hours on the family trees, investigators tracked down several distant relatives, and through the process of elimination, tracked down the closest living relatives. They eventually contacted a relative who was willing to provide a fresh DNA sample to assist in the investigation. It took another 3 months before any positive results were confirmed. On Monday, January 23, 2023, 52 years to the date, on which the Mojave Jane Doe was discovered, lead investigator Lori Miller received the call she had been waiting for. They had a name. After a half-century, the Jane Doe was discovered to be Colleen Audrey Rice. The news was first shared with the remaining relatives of Colleen before the announcement was made on the Mojave County Sheriff's Office Facebook page that same Monday afternoon. Colleen was born March 17, 1931, to parents James C. Rice and Flossie Truitt. She was raised in Portsmouth, Ohio, and is known to have a few family ties to eastern Kentucky. It is unclear if she had any siblings. Colleen attended Portsmouth High School, but it was unknown if she graduated, as she married William Davis in 1946, at the young age of 15. After searching through old school records, investigators were able to obtain an old yearbook photo to attach her case file. Colleen would have been 39 years old at the time of her death. Little else was known about her personal life. Investigators who tracked down her living relatives did not garner much information, as they were mostly distant relations of Colleen. What they did learn was that Colleen had become estranged from her family and husband. Although she showed signs of childbirth, there was no means of finding her children or records to prove if she had any at all. It seemed as if Colleen's life had been erased after she had disappeared. Investigators tried to find possible links to how Colleen arrived in Arizona, but that too dried up quickly. What they did know is that Colleen seemed to have been doing well for herself, as she was well-groomed and healthy when her body was first discovered. Investigators had also tried to find out if she had changed her name to start a new life away from her family, but the people in Kingman didn't seem to recognize her as well. Following the investigation, all legal work was completed to allow her living family members the chance to put her remains to rest. Her remains were exhumed and flown to Ohio in February 2023 to be buried alongside her family, with a headstone burying her name and date of birth and death. Case was finally gaining traction. They now knew who their victim was. Chief Development Officer at Othram Incorporated, Kristen Middleman, said it was a relief to finally have the name for the victim. It is heartwarming to witness law enforcement and the public come together to restore a murdered woman's name. After a half-century, she said, for the investigators, solving the crime became personal. They believed Colleen deserved better in death. She deserved dignity. Lead investigator Lori Miller kept a copy of the composite sketch taped to her computer as a daily reminder as to who and what they were fighting for while investigating the cold case. This was a Jane Doe. Now I have a name. She's always been a person. Now she's a person with a name. kind of hits you, said Miller. According to news reports, Miller said that one of the challenges they faced in the investigation was finding people who were still around from when the incident first happened. It became quite daunting in the fact that we were trying to locate people that were still alive, she said. WOWK 13 News was able to find a distant relative of Colleen's, who also happened to be a genealogist himself. Eli Allen is related to Colleen from his mother's side of the family and currently lives in Ohio. Allen said that when he first heard about the case and discovered the name of the victim, he realized they were related when I saw Rice, which is in my mother's line. I had to know we were related because it was that much more intimate, he said. Mother's line have to know how we're related because it was that much more intimate. Identifying Colleen after more than 50 years is a testimony to the work he and so many others are doing. The more baffling question for investigators now is who killed Colleen and discarded her body in such an undignified manner. Autopsy reports did not find any foreign DNA on the victim's body at the time, and the possibility of assault was ruled out entirely. The theory of her being murdered by her husband was also ruled out as interview with the family suggested that Colleen had left of her own volition. No one who knew her personally at the time had seemed particularly interested in finding her, as there has never been a missing person report filed. The 50-year period of the investigation, Colleen's murder had not been linked to any possible murderers, who may have been active in the area around the 1970s. Her manner of death did not provide many clues either for investigators to determine patterns related to known serial killers at the time. Even though Colleen had been identified, the case remains ongoing. The SIU is still investigating in the hopes of finding the suspect or suspects responsible for Colleen's untimely death. Investigators are appealing to the public to come forward with any information regarding Colleen's murder and information about her life, since she left her family behind in Ohio to start afresh in Arizona. The public is urged to contact the Mojave County Sheriff's Office Special Investigation Unit. The numbers will be provided in the description box below. In covering cases such as Colleen's, we hope to highlight not only the dedicated work of investigators, but the truly amazing advances in technology that are now making it possible to solve cases that many believe could have remained cold forever. But apart from that, we also hope that these cases keep our community informed. If you have faced a similar situation or have information regarding this case or any other unsolved cases, please reach out to the relevant authorities. You may just be the key to cracking the case. So looking back at today's case, which part did you find the saddest? The fact that it took decades to find her identity, or that no one really looked for her when she went missing? The case of Martin Durham. Martin Durham was born in 1969 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He was an ordinary child and lived in good conditions, surrounded by natural beauty. In addition, he loved fishing and hiking, capturing photos along the way. He usually took a tent and a hiking backpack to enjoy a few days in the fresh air, often accompanied by an older cousin. At 17, Martin met his first love, Glenna Johnson, who was a year older. They lived in the same area and attended the same school. Their romance was brief, leading to a quick breakup, but they got back together and broke up many times. They shared many interests and could not stay apart for long. Despite their similarities, they ultimately decided to end the relationship and go their separate ways. For a long time, they neither saw nor communicated with each other. During this period, Martin met another woman, Christine Keller, and he quickly fell in love with her. The two of them got along very well, and they soon moved in together. After a short time of dating, he realized that she would be an ideal life partner, and they should build a stronger relationship. In the following years, Christine and Martin married and moved into a house given to them by their parents, located in a quiet residential area of the city. Over the next few years, they had 2 sons and a daughter. Christine focused on managing the home and caring for the children, while Martin worked to support the family. In addition to his main job repairing cars, he also worked at a restaurant in the city of Lamb. Despite this, the early years of their marriage were challenging, especially because their children were born close in age. They had many difficulties in taking care of their young children. They slept little and were often exhausted, leading to frequent arguments. However, they were determined to overcome these difficulties. Martin was a devoted father and made every effort to support his family. Many people saw him as a role model. In March 1995, Martin's family faced a tragedy when a truck ran a red light and collided with his car. The truck dragged his car along the road, crushing both Martin and the driver. Martin suffered severe injuries, including broken ribs, a broken jaw, broken legs, and a traumatic brain injury that severely damaged a large part of his brain. Doctors tried their best to save him, but he was in a coma for months. He underwent multiple surgeries and slowly began to recover. However, Martin's difficulties were not over. It took a long time for him to return to his normal life. He had to relearn basic movements like sitting up and holding his head before progressing to more complex ones. The accident left his face disfigured, and he lost some brain functions. Despite the difficulties, he tried to overcome them and return to a normal life with his family. He spent a long time moving around in a wheelchair before transitioning to crutches. Although he gradually overcame the physical effects of the accident, he remained psychologically affected. Martin could no longer work as an auto mechanic to support his family, and he encountered many physical limitations that turned his life upside down. The hardest thing for him was not being able to maintain the active lifestyle he had before. He loved camping, fishing, and traveling, but now he was better off just hanging around the house. Every movement caused him severe pain, which only the strongest painkillers could help manage. According to doctors, these effects would persist throughout his life. This challenging time affected not only Martin, who survived the accident, but also his family. His wife, Christine, previously managed only the children and household chores, but now she had to handle the family's finances. She was compelled to enroll the children in daycare and find a job to support them, in addition to caring for her sick husband. Fortunately, her close relatives pitched in to help. With their support, Christine was able to manage all the difficulties. However, Martin also became aggressive and hostile toward his wife. In addition, he lost his memory. He could not remember much about his past, including family events, and sometimes forgot his children's names. Longtime friends and acquaintances became strangers to him. He was isolated because he did not communicate well with people due to severe memory loss and difficulty concentrating. This made him cold and looked down upon. Martin often retreated into his own thoughts, which he kept to himself. Meanwhile, he was recovering from his injuries and regularly attended physiotherapy, sometimes staying in the hospital for treatment. He switched doctors several times, but fortunately, his physical condition gradually improved. However, he was still tormented by the psychological aftermath of his trauma. At the same time, Martin constantly controlled the family spending and criticized his wife's financial management. This made their relationship more and more strained. This was a very difficult time for the young family. Martin went through a difficult process of dealing with trauma and psychological problems but was unable to overcome them. Some issues made him angry, and he often lost his temper with his wife without justification. Christine did her best to accept the changes in her husband's behavior, but eventually, she felt she couldn't take it anymore. Years after the accident, Christine filed for divorce. Later, she admitted that she didn't want to do it, but she couldn't stand Martin any longer. The divorce was a major blow to Martin. He felt resentment and disappointment for a long time. After some time passed, he was able to regain his spirits. He received a large insurance payout for the accident, which he used to buy real estate and purchase another house. In addition, Martin was also paid a monthly sum by his insurance company as compensation for the accident during his recovery. Thanks to this, he was able to continue his life and take care of himself without financial hardship. After that, Martin moved to his new house with the parrot that Christine loved so much. She had left the bird with him to keep him company and prevent loneliness. The bird, a 15-year-old African gray parrot named Bat, was quite old. This new house was located in Sand Lake, not far from his previous house. He had big plans to recover as soon as possible so he could return to normal life for the sake of his children. Martin quickly settled into his new place. He kept in regular contact with his children, and even his relationship with his ex-wife Christine improved. She noticed that he finally had an interest in life and enjoyed spending time in the backyard. He discovered his talent for design on his own, and this was soon recognized by others. Neighbors frequently sought his help for designing private gardens and lawn care. This job helped him earn more income, gain confidence in dealing with life's difficulties, and improve his health. Doctors observed a steady improvement in his condition, moving in a positive direction. Although Martin's health and mood had improved significantly, Christine still hesitated to return to him. She was afraid that old problems might return. She kept her distance, maintained contact, and brought the children to visit. By chance, Martin reconnected with his first love, Glenna Johnson, who had also recently divorced. They rekindled old feelings and began a romantic relationship. Glenna eventually moved in with Martin. Glenna's children remained with her ex-husband, but she still visited them regularly. Martin's children also visited him from time to time. Glenna and Martin enjoyed activities such as fishing, hunting, and hiking. She assisted with his physical limitations during these times. However, it was challenging, so they often opted for walks in the area or visits to the casino, which they had loved in their youth. These casino visits became a monthly routine for them, where they tested their luck. They became well known in the local community, often inviting friends and acquaintances over to play poker, hosting backyard barbecues, and generally forming a harmonious partnership. It seemed they had found each other again and were happy together. In the summer of 2005, Glenna and Martin decided to get married. Everything appeared fine, but their closest friends knew there were underlying issues in the seemingly perfect relationship. After the accident, Martin changed, becoming more short-tempered and demanding. He tried to control Glenna and disliked when she did things without him or left him alone for errands. He tried to manage all their finances, which caused problems. She tried to manage family problems by herself, but he was suspicious that she was not entirely honest, spending excessively on unnecessary items. During this time, he continued to receive disability benefits, and his wife took on guardianship, but she had one weakness. Glenna was a gambler and spent a lot of money on it. She visited the casino much more often than her husband, without him knowing, and lost a lot of money. Additionally, there were issues between Glenna and his ex-wife, Christine. Apparently, Martin frequently complained about Christine, accusing her of leaving him during a tough time after the accident. But he didn't talk about how he had made Christine's life unbearable. Christine tolerated him for 2 years before leaving, but she continued to support him as much as she could. Christine kept in touch with Martin and brought the children to visit him. However, he spoke negatively about Christine to his new wife, Glenna. Plus, Glenna also expressed that she absolutely did not like the children of Martin and Christine. This made Christine and her children feel uncomfortable to the point where they didn't want to visit Martin when Glenna was there. They disliked hearing unpleasant things about their mother, Christine, and she supported their decision by not bringing them to their father. Martin became angry with his ex-wife and constantly quarreled with her. This led to tension with the children and Glenna. Overall, the relationships deteriorated, and everyone's behavior only worsened the situation. A clear testament to Glenna's deep love for Martin was the tattoo of his name on the back of her hand, which she got 18 years ago when they were dating. She never removed it, likely because she had strong emotions for him all these years. She had still loved him for the past 15 years and waited for the moment they would be together again. However, within the family, the relationship was far from romantic, with frequent disputes over money. Martin suspected Glenna was overspending, and debt piled up. She often took money from him without his knowledge. Over time, she took complete control of the family's finances, further straining their relationship. Glenna began using the check from the insurance company that Martin received every month as an allowance. In addition, she also illegally traded in some strong drugs. At the time of the accident, Martin did not take these medications regularly, resulting in a large amount of medication being left unused. Glenna sold these medications secretly. However, his involvement in this activity remains unclear. Some believe he was complicit in the sale, helping him earn extra income while he was recovering from the traffic accident and struggling financially. But there are also those who oppose this theory, believing that Glenna sold the remaining amount of medicine without telling him. Even though Glenna and Martin's relationship was having problems, they persisted in a toxic relationship for over 11 years. By 2015, they still acted friendly and were always seen together, but they no longer concealed their failing marriage. Occasionally, the discontent between them led to increasingly frequent scandals. One of Glenna's friends later claimed to have witnessed their breakup, during which Glenna threatened to kill Martin. Despite this, they mostly maintained the appearance of an ideal couple, walking hand in hand as they did at the start of their relationship in their youth. By May 2015, the issue of divorce had become serious. One morning that May, Christine, Martin's ex-wife, discovered that Martin was selling his house. She found an advertisement on an auction site and was very surprised. She immediately called Martin to ask why he suddenly wanted to sell a house he loved so much, where he had devoted his love to creating his garden. However, he was unaware of the sale, so he asked his current wife, Glenna, about it. Glenna claimed it was a mistake and said she would resolve it, but the fact is she didn't solve it. Previously, their car had been repossessed due to debts, and Glenna had similarly assured Martin it was a mistake and she would fix it, but nothing changed. The auction for the house was scheduled for 3 weeks later, by the end of the month. Perhaps due to the debt accumulated during their marriage, Glenna wanted to sell the house to pay off the debt, but she did not want to tell Martin about this. On May 13, 2015, one of Martin's neighbors visited him early in the morning to discuss some routine matters. The neighbor was surprised when no one responded to his knock, as Martin usually kept his door open at that time. Concerned, the neighbor entered the house and called out to Martin and Glenna, but no one replied. Venturing further inside, he discovered the reason for the silence. In their bedroom, he found Martin lying on the floor in a pool of blood, and next to him was Glenna, who was bleeding heavily from the head. Terrified that the perpetrator might still be around, the neighbor fled from the scene and immediately called 911. When the ambulance arrived, they realized that Martin was lifeless. Martin was lying on his side, wearing only his underwear, his body already cold, and the doctors confirmed that the 46-year-old had died several hours earlier. However, Glenna was still alive and even conscious. She tried to say something. She managed to utter a fragmented sentence that was not understood. Glenna was found lying next to Martin, fully clothed. However, she could not provide any useful information about the incident. She was rushed to the hospital for medical treatment. A bullet had grazed her skull without damaging the brain, so her injuries were not severe. She recovered quickly after surgery at the clinic. Detectives were able to question her soon after, but she was still undergoing treatment, and they had other cases to handle. The investigators tried to piece together the sequence of the incident by examining the crime scene thoroughly. It did not appear to be a robbery because valuables or personal items in the house were not missing. Even the money left in a visible spot was untouched. Additionally, there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting Glenna and Martin might have known the attacker and let him in. During this time, police discovered that Martin was taking strong painkillers and that Glenna was involved in selling them. There was then an assumption that the illegal trade may have triggered the attack. The entire scheme of selling medicines was uncovered, and detectives believed there may have been a conflict with the buyer during the transfer process. However, by that time, forensic experts had already examined and analyzed the crime scene, including the bullets and weapons found in the house. The pistol was later tested and confirmed to be the murder weapon. In fact, this pistol had belonged to Martin for many years, yet both of them were shot with it. At first, the attacker must have entered the house, known exactly where the weapon was, and retrieved it. Then he would have found the magazine, loaded the gun, and started shooting. This plan seemed too complicated and therefore unlikely. Moreover, during a more thorough search of the bathroom, Martin's painkillers were found and had not been stolen, which ruled out the possibility of selling them and ruled out the motive for the crime being an attack by the buyer. The weapon used to kill Martin was found under the sofa in the living room. There was a lot of blood there, which did not match the location where the body was found. Apparently, an attack also took place in the living room, a shooting, and then the shooting continued in the bedroom. Martin might have been shot in the living room and then the body was moved, but why was this done? It seemed this was done intentionally, perhaps to stage the crime and mislead the investigation. This assumption was confirmed when a spent cartridge case was found in the living room, indicating that the shooting occurred there. As the investigation progressed, more questions surfaced. Blood samples from different rooms were analyzed, revealing unexpected results. The analysis showed that all shots fired at Martin happened in the bedroom. His blood was not present in the living room, and there were no signs of his body being moved. The blood found in the living room belonged solely to Glenna, who was discovered in the bedroom. The bullet casing found in the living room corresponded to the shot that hit her head, supporting this theory. But how did she manage to reach the bedroom after this injury? Medical experts informed the police that this scenario was possible because Glenna's injury was less severe than initially thought. She could have reached the bedroom by herself, especially since she was conscious when found. Nonetheless, the situation appeared unusual. From then on, police began to suspect that Glenna fired at her husband and then injured herself to divert suspicion. However, these theories still needed solid evidence. At this time, the police were unable to interview Glenna, as she was still in the hospital undergoing treatment and recovery. They took her mobile phone for investigation. Through this, detectives discovered that their family was experiencing a severe financial crisis. Just the day before Martin's death, she had searched online for how to use the Uyghur 6 pistol, the same gun involved in Martin's death and her own head wound. Police found 2 farewell letters, in which Glenna apologized to her children for what she was about to do. She also said goodbye to everyone, indicating her plan to end her life. The Supreme Court identified Glenna as the perpetrator of the crime based on all the collected evidence. The investigation was reopened, but something compelled her to shoot her husband first. Martin was killed in the bedroom and Glenna shot herself in the head in the living room. However, unlike Martin, she did not die instantly and managed to reach the marital bedroom. This could be clarified by talking to her, so the police waited until they could interview her. They continued gathering evidence in the meantime. Martin's family was already convinced that they were not attacked by a stranger. The shooter was his wife, Glenna. Christine Keller, the ex-wife of Martin, was shocked by the events. Although she never thought highly of Glenna, especially because of Glenna's aggressive behavior, she did not expect this to happen. Then, Christine took her old parrot home to the children. Meanwhile, detectives were finally able to speak with Glenna, who was feeling well. Doctors confirmed that she understood what was happening around her and was ready to talk to the detectives. Despite the doctor's positive assessment, she told the investigators that, in her view, she never wrote farewell letters and did not plan to end her life, let alone kill her husband. Police officers were concerned because Glenna completely denied being involved in the attack on her husband. Yet she also claimed she couldn't remember what happened on that tragic day. This inconsistency seemed suspicious and hinted that she might be a suspect, but at that time they had no solid evidence against her. Glenna was released from the hospital several months later. Meanwhile, the investigation had not uncovered any new evidence. Police were concerned that Glenna's denials and the trauma she had suffered might convince a jury that she was innocent. One day, Christine was awakened by the parrot's voice and went to see it. She was amazed by what it was saying. She decided to use her phone to record the monologue. The parrot kept repeating, "Beg Glenna, don't shoot him." This caused Christine great shock and fear. For a while afterwards, she was even haunted by nightmares. She immediately informed the police and later showed them the video recording. Although the use of a parrot as a witness in court was unprecedented, from that moment on, all of the detectives' suspicions about Glenna's involvement in the case were confirmed. New details of the case attracted widespread public and media attention. Meanwhile, the investigation continued. The incident was again in the news at the end of June 2016 when police arrested Glenna. They had been collecting evidence to piece together a full case that would clearly show the jury who the killer was and help the Martin family get justice. It was initially thought that the footage of the parrot accusing Glenna would not be used, as it might seem too provocative, and it was uncertain how the jury would react to it. The prosecutor argued that Glenna was in severe financial trouble and could not admit her gambling failures to her spouse. For a long time before the murder, she neglected to pay bills because all her money went to cover debts from her gambling addiction. Eventually, she decided to end her life writing 2 letters, one to her husband and one to the children. This suggested that Glenna did not initially plan to harm her husband, but something went awry. The final straw was the failed sale of the family home, which was put up for auction without her husband's knowledge. When Martin found out about this from Christine, he likely confronted Glenna. A fierce argument may have ensued, leading her to kill him in a fit of rage before deciding to end her life. Glenna and her lawyer claimed that she had no memory of the shooting or the letter and insisted that she loved her husband too much to hurt him. They presented a list of medications she was taking to improve cognitive function as evidence of her mental condition. She also denied searching online for how to use a gun, stating that she only used her phone for games and calls. The trial lasted 10 days. The prosecution believed it had a strong case to persuade the jury. However, the jury seemed uncertain due to the largely circumstantial evidence. Then, a video of the parrot's words was introduced as a crucial piece of evidence. Experts said the parrot had formed a close relationship with its owner, Martin, and had learned to imitate Martin's voice. Most experts agreed that those words left a strong and deep impression on the parrot's memory, so it repeated them over and over again. In the end, this evidence was effective. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found 49-year-old Glenna guilty. In this case, the parrot played an important role as a witness, contributing to finding justice. The case of Jassy Correa. Jassy Correa was born in Praia, Cabo Verde, but her family moved to the United States when she was just 3 years old. She grew up in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and Boston became her hometown. As she grew older, Jassy became a loving mother to her daughter, Gabriella. However, Jassy's personal life was marred by difficulties. Jassy's husband, Miguel Castro, physically attacked her. Despite wanting to leave him, Miguel refused to let her go and severely beat her. Jassy eventually reported the incident to the police, and Miguel was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Jassy worked as a waitress at Del Frisco, a Boston restaurant. In her free time, she enjoyed dancing and photography. She cherished moments spent with her family, friends, and daughter, Gabriella. One of her favorite activities was taking her little daughter to the park. On the evening of February 23, 2019, Jassy celebrated her birthday with friends at Venue, a nightclub in Boston's Deter district. Before heading out, she left her 2-year-old daughter with her family and got ready for a night out wearing a new orange jumpsuit. They had spent the evening dancing and drinking champagne at a nightclub. When the club closed, Jassy and her 2 friends stepped outside, but they eventually went their separate ways, leaving Jassy alone. She never made it home that night, and her phone was turned off with all calls going straight to voicemail. For 2 days, Sunday and Monday, there was no news from Jassy. No one had seen her since she left the nightclub on Sunday morning. On Tuesday, February 26th, Jassy's father, when Korea and one of Jassy's friends went to the police station to report her disappearance. The police immediately launched an investigation. The detective's first priority was to determine where Jassy went after leaving the nightclub. Jassy's family and friends distributed flyers around the city, hoping someone might have information about her whereabouts. The detectives also interviewed Jassy's friends who were with her that night, but they didn't know where she had gone after leaving the club. According to her friends, Jassy had planned to head home after saying goodbye. To gather more information, the police interviewed witnesses and reviewed CCTV footage from cameras inside and outside the nightclub. One recording showed Jassy on the sidewalk on Tremont Street, near the nightclub, talking to several people at 2:14 a.m. This was after she had left the club. The footage revealed that Jassy, who appeared to be intoxicated, mistakenly got into an Uber she hadn't ordered. The driver, unhappy about the mix-up, argued with her and eventually pushed her out of the vehicle. After being forced out of the car, Jassy continued to argue with the driver. That's when an unknown man approached her and took her hand, pulling her aside to talk. Despite possibly wanting to leave, Jassy was unable to free herself from his grasp. The CCTV footage showed the man still holding Jassy's hands, pulling her closer. Eventually, Jassy left the area with him. In hindsight, it's clear that she had fallen prey to a predator who took advantage of her vulnerable state. The next camera footage showed Jassy jumping onto his back, and he carried her to his car. They drove away together. 14 minutes later, the police had many questions to answer. Who was this man and where had he taken Jassy? Fortunately, they quickly identified the man and located his address. Louis Coleman, a 32-year-old man from a good family background, was with Jassy at the time of the incident. He had earned a master's degree in physics and had no prior record with the law. Notably, there was no information in the police database about Louis owning a car. However, his mother, a resident of California, was the owner of a 2016 red Buick, which matched the type of vehicle involved in the incident with Jassy. Louis lived in Providence, Rhode Island, about 50 miles from the Venue nightclub where he was last seen with Jassy. When police arrived at his home, they found that Louis was no longer there. However, CCTV footage from inside and outside the building revealed disturbing evidence. It's worth noting that the drive from the Venue club to Louis's apartment typically takes about an hour. Since Louis returned to his apartment at 4:15 a.m. on Sunday, approximately 2 hours after he was seen leaving with Jassy, it's likely that he stopped somewhere along the way. The next day, Louis sent an email to his colleagues stating that he would be taking a few more days off. Based on the content of the email, it appears that Louis was trying to buy time to cover his tracks. Over the next 2 days, Louis attempted to conceal evidence of the crime. Further CCTV footage analysis sheds light on what happened to Jassy after she left with Louis. Although the police never released the initial footage due to ethical concerns, it showed Louis entering his apartment building with Jassy. FBI Special Agent Thomas Sukis described the footage as follows. Louis was seen walking from a red sedan towards the front of the building carrying a body with long hair and orange pants. Agent Zukis believes that this footage shows Louis carrying Jassy's body into his apartment building. According to Zukis, security footage from the building's lobby reveals that at approximately 4:27 a.m., Louis entered the building carrying an unconscious or already deceased Jassy in his arms. He proceeded to the elevator, took it to the 6th floor. Notably, on February 26th, the same day Jassy's father reported her disappearance to the police, Louis made a suspicious purchase at Walmart. His receipt shows he bought multiple items that raise red flags, including protective suits, duct tape, electrical tape, candles, gloves, safety goggles, a mask, and Clorox bleach. The next day, while friends and family distributed flyers with Jassy's picture, Louis made another concerning purchase at Walmart, caught on camera at 9:22 p.m. This time, he bought a large suitcase and a canister. On February 27, 2019, at around 9:58 p.m., Louis returned to the apartment building and video footage appears to show him carrying the newly purchased large suitcase. Further footage captures Lewis taking the suitcase from his apartment to his vehicle in the parking lot, as evidenced by a recording at 2:15 a.m. on February 28. A video shows a man, later identified as Lewis, struggling to lift a suitcase into the trunk of his car. This footage is part of a larger investigation into the disappearance of Jassy Correa, who was last seen on February 24th and was believed to be at Lewis' apartment. Between 2:44 a.m. and 4:02 a.m., Lewis was seen leaving the building multiple times carrying various items, including cardboard boxes, trash bags, a bottle of bleach, a computer tower, a laptop case, and a small duffel bag. On February 28, 2019, police obtained a search warrant for Lewis's apartment. During their search, they found several suspicious items, including 2 packages of hooded coveralls and 2 respirator masks. They also examined a sofa in the apartment, which was missing one of its 4 large cushions. Outside the apartment complex, in a dumpster, police found a collection of items that raised further suspicions. These included white trash bags, a bag containing plastic sheets, men's jeans with bleach stains, and the belt. Additional items found in the dumpster included a white nylon hooded coverall, an unfilled box of baking soda, clear safety goggles, duct tape packaging, rubbing alcohol, Walmart bags, used plastic gloves, an empty package from a car air freshener, 3 used packages of purifying charcoal, and a sponge. On the afternoon of February 28, 2019, police stopped a car driven by Lewis near Wilmington, Delaware. Officers ordered Lewis to exit the vehicle and asked if he was alone. Lewis reportedly responded by saying, "She's in the trunk." When police investigated, they found the body of Jassy wrapped in a sofa cushion cover inside a black trash bag, which was placed in a large suitcase that matched the one Lewis had taken into his apartment the previous day. Experts who inspected the car found 2 cracks on the passenger side windshield, leading police to suspect that the man had attacked Jassy inside the vehicle. As a result, Lewis was arrested and taken to a Delaware State Police barracks. During questioning, Lewis had a large bandage on the right side of his face, which he claimed was from sheep when asked about it. A forensic examination revealed that Jassy died from a combination of strangulation and blunt force trauma. Additionally, seminal fluid was found on her body, and DNA analysis matched Lewis's DNA. Prosecutors noted that Lewis's DNA was also found under Jassy's fingertips. Although the exact location of Jassy's death could not be determined, it is believed to have occurred either in the car or at Lewis's apartment. On Saturday, March 9, 2019, family and community members gathered at St. Peter's Parish in Dorchester to pay their respects to Jassy Correa. Many wore white or displayed buttons, shirts, and sweatshirts with Jassy's face and the phrase, "Justice for Jassy." Maka DeAndrade, Jassy's cousin and best friend, delivered the first eulogy, expressing the community's sadness and acceptance of Jassy's passing. DeAndrade said, "We may not understand why Jassy's life was cut short, but I have faith that her death was not in vain. I trust that God has a plan, and I have faith in that." Boston Mayor Marty Walsh addressed the crowd, vowing to work towards creating a safer world for women. He emphasized that young women should be able to go out and celebrate without fear and return home safely to their loved ones. He acknowledged the immense pain Jassy Correa's family has endured and expressed his condolences. When Correa expressed gratitude to the city and law enforcement agencies for their tireless efforts in investigating Jassy's disappearance and death, he also paid a heartfelt tribute to his daughter, saying, "Rest in paradise, my dear Jassy. Rest in peace, my dear child." Lewis Coleman, the suspect, has been charged with kidnapping resulting in death, a crime that could carry the death penalty or a life sentence. However, prosecutors have announced that they will not seek capital punishment. During the trial, prosecutors presented evidence, including a video of Coleman dragging Jassy's body into his apartment and his online search history following her disappearance. FBI agents reported on Lewis's online activity in the days following the alleged kidnapping. He searched for topics such as whether a person can fit inside a suitcase and how to remove a tooth that is not loose. However, Lewis's defense team has disputed the relevance of this evidence to the kidnapping charge. They argue that the prosecution's focus has been on Lewis's actions after the alleged victim's death, rather than on the kidnapping itself. Attorney David stated, "This case is not about how Lewis behaved after her death, or whether he did anything illegal or inappropriate. The government's evidence has mainly centered on these issues, but I believe they are not crucial to determining whether a kidnapping occurred." Court documents filed by the prosecution and defense provide a detailed account of the events surrounding Jassy Correa's disappearance and death. Although they sides present different versions of what happened, the documents reveal disturbing details about the circumstances leading up to Jassy's death. Prosecutors established that the defendant, Lewis, was at the same nightclub as Jassy and her friends on the night of her disappearance. However, Lewis was interacting with a different woman he had just met, not Jassy. They exchanged phone numbers and texted each other while at the club and after it closed. The prosecution and defense have presented conflicting narratives about the events that unfolded. Prosecutors argue that Jassy was not the aggressor and that Lewis deceived her into getting into his car by offering her a ride to her friend's apartment, ultimately taking her life. In contrast, the defense claims that Jassy became aggressive after being pushed out of an Uber by the driver and that she initiated a fight with Lewis. The defense argues that the crime was a spontaneous altercation rather than a premeditated act of stalking, kidnapping, and murder. Prosecutors pointed out that the defendant's main argument was that the victim, who weighed 119 pounds, had attacked the defendant, who weighed 200 pounds. However, this claim was not convincing, especially considering that the victim's autopsy revealed the presence of multiple prohibited substances in her body, in addition to alcohol. The defense team attempted to minimize their client's involvement in the crime. Despite this, in June 2022, was found guilty of one count of kidnapping resulting in death. The defense team then filed a motion arguing that the evidence was insufficient to support the conviction. But this motion did not change the outcome of the trial. In October 2022, Lewis Coleman, 36, was sentenced to life in prison without parole for kidnapping and killing Jassy Correa. The court also ordered him to pay $60,000 in compensation to the victim's family. Holly's case appeared in the distant past on the vast timeline of history, breaking through the formerly impenetrable veil of obscurity. She is the lost daughter who has now been found. Holly's discovery, however, brought up even more questions than it did solutions. Where has Holly been for the past 4 decades, and who killed her parents, Harold and Tina? We go back in time to a chilly winter day on January 12, 1981, in the vast wilderness of northern Harris County, Texas, just outside the bustling boundaries of Houston City. That day, a civilian's dog decided to venture out into the arid woods, only to return with the terrifying remains of a human arm in its jaw. The skin was rotting, telling a terrible story about what was concealed among the dense vegetation. The frantic search that followed this grisly discovery revealed a dark secret concealed in the dense forest close to Wallaceville Road. As the sun bounced off the tall trees, it created an erratic pattern of shadows that deceived the eye. The only sound in the silent, desolate woods came from the skeleton leaves being crunched under the civilian foot, and the dog's poo. The sound of the dog barking in the distance broke the stillness of the woods. The perplexing dog worked furiously to unearth something from a heap beneath a massive old tree. The civilian observed the dog's frenzied excitement. Intense anticipation, its tail whipped from side to side. The civilian felt shivers run through his soul as he came to a terrifying realization. Beneath the deceiving covering of fallen leaves was a shallow grave harboring the grim death of 2 bodies, interlaced and neatly placed beside each other. The gravity of this gruesome discovery weighed heavily on the civilian's mind. He ran recklessly in the direction of the closest phone booth and dialed 911. Because of the shock of the discovery, his voice was trembling as he spoke to the operator at the other end of the line. The couple's decayed bodies lied in the dark green area, only a few feet apart. Their bodies tragically bore the impact of time, giving in to decay and wearing away. This stipulated that they had been dead for a couple of months. Both bodies had been concealed in the woods just 100 yards from Wallaceville Road. When investigators arrived on the scene, they were looking for any hints that might help them determine who the deceased were. They came across a horrifying scene. They identified the first body to be a young woman between the ages of 15 and 25. She was between 5 feet 4 inches and 5 feet 9 inches tall. She was white with possible Native American blend. Her body was found close to a pair of green running shorts, and she had long reddish-brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. The woman had been choked to death. She was covered in a bloody towel and was otherwise naked. Although no additional clothing was discovered at the scene, detectives noted that the woman probably had a gap in her teeth and had short, stubby nails. A young man's body believed to be between 20 and 30 years old lay next to her, though it was possible that he was as young as 15, since it was in the 1980s. They did not have the same forensic advancements that exist today. He was between 5 feet 4 and 5 feet tall. He was white and had brown hair and eyes. The man's neck showed signs of degeneration in the upper vertebrae, which may have been caused by a previous injury. He had prominent eyebrows and his wisdom teeth had either been extracted or had not yet fully developed, according to the investigators. The victim had been beaten to death after being stripped, bound, and ganged. Investigators in Harris County were left with many unanswered questions following the shocking discovery of these two young people. Who were these people and what circumstances led to their tragic end? Investigators hoped to be able to solve this mystery as they continued to piece together the available evidence. As if the discovery of the two decaying bodies in these woods wasn't terrifying enough, the neighborhood was shocked when a third body was found there 18 months later. This time, it was the body of 15-year-old Michelle Garvey, who had been missing for a month. Michelle had been sexually assaulted and strangled. Her life was violently taken away from her in a cruel manner. It was obvious that Michelle's body had been there for some time when investigators arrived at the scene, because neither shoes nor a bra were to be found. The mystery surrounding the tragic deaths of these young people was further complicated by the fact that Michelle's body was found in the exact same location as the earlier discovered bodies. This only increased the sense of unease in the neighborhood as many people began to wonder if there was a link between Michelle's death and the deaths of the two previously found bodies. The task ahead of them was daunting, but investigators were determined to find the answers to the numerous questions that remained after these shocking revelations. The other two bodies that were discovered before Michelle's were not immediately identified, but Michelle was. To reconstruct the couple found in the woods, forensic artist Mary Mace was hired to do the job, in the hopes that someone would come forward with information about their identities. The reconstruction was widely disseminated, but no one came forward with any helpful leads. The investigators had to file the case away as unsolved because there were so few clues to continue with the investigation. 30 years later, in 2011, it was decided to exhume the bodies of the unidentified couple in order to gather DNA samples. This resulted in yet another dead end, and the investigation was closed. Then, in January 2022, new information was discovered in a twist that nobody anticipated. The case of the unidentified couple discovered in the Houston woods has finally made some headway after 41 long years of unsolved mysteries. In 2022, the challenging task of identifying the two bodies was assigned to forensic scientist Allison Peacock of FHD Forensics. She and her team got to work, entering the DNA data into the national database of genetic profiles called GeneMatch. They were shocked to learn of a match to the male victim's cousin who lived in Kentucky. After getting in touch with him, they finally were able to identify the two people who had been discovered buried in the woods as 17-year-old Tina Gale Klaus, formerly known as Tina Galen, and her husband, 21-year-old Harold Dean Klaus. The year 1978 saw a destined meeting of Harold Dean Klaus Jr. and Tina Galen in the blissful Florida community of New Smyrna Beach, when she was only 15. Young Tina found herself drawn to the slightly older Harold Dean, who was 19 years old at the time. In an ironic turn of events, their families were already intertwined because Tina's brother and Harold's sister had started a relationship of their own. Harold and Tina were caught up in a whirlwind of romance that picked them up and carried them quickly to the Volusia County Courthouse under Florida's colorful skies. They exchanged marriage vows there on June 25, 1979, cementing their ardent love. The birth of Holly Marie Klaus on January 24, 1980, was a sign of their ardent love and dedication to one another. Despite being young, Harold and Tina were admired by their friends and family for their unwavering commitment to parenthood. As the 1980s began to take shape, Harold and Tina bid a fond farewell to the well-known Florida shores. They focused their attention on a new life and ventured into the sweltering heat of Louisville, Texas, a developing suburb buzzing with the promise of prosperity. Harold, a master woodworker who lived in the vibrant energy of the Dallas metropolitan area, had his sights set on taking advantage of the construction boom that swept the area in the early 1980s. The couple had high hopes for a prosperous future in the Texan trade industry thanks to Harold's skills as a skilled cabinet maker. According to their devoted relatives back home, their relationship remained without a scratch. There were no arguments or tensions. The couple's relationship appeared to be hooded by a perfect harmony. They kept their loved ones informed of their Texan journey through regular phone calls. However, in October 1980, as the autumn leaves started to fall, an unsettling silence soon descended upon the familial phone lines connecting Harold and Tina with their families. The happy chatter suddenly stopped, leaving a jarring silence with a sinister air of mystery. It was unknown what had happened to the couple in the months that had followed. Their killer or killers as well was still a mystery. But perhaps the investigators would finally be able to learn the truth since their identities were finally established. Their demise is thought to have taken place between October 1980 and January 1981. When Alice and Peacock contacted the families, Harold's mother provided them with their first tip. She explained that toward the end of December 1980, a sister named Susan called to let them know that Tina and Harold had joined their little religious community and no longer desired to communicate with their families. Sister Susan then requested $1,000 to transport the couple's car, a red 1978 AMC Concorde, back to Florida as part of the group's requirements for joining. Clearly concerned for Harold and Tina's safety, the family made the decision to call the police. They were instructed by the police to indulge Susan. Finally, a man and two women showed up at the racetrack Daytona in Florida to receive $1,000 in exchange for the car. The three people were immediately detained by police as soon as the family received the car. At the time, a police report was made for this operation. Unfortunately, the 1980 police report has not yet been located, which poses a serious obstacle for the investigation. When Harold's sister brought up the missing baby during the same conversation, Allison's heart sank. In their investigation, that particular detail had never surfaced. There had already been so many twists and turns in the case, and now there might be a missing child. After taking a deep breath, Allison made a promise to Harold's sister that they would do everything possible to discover what had happened to the baby. Allison learned that Harold and Tina did indeed have a child as she investigated the situation further. A kid called Holly Klaus. When her parents disappeared, she was only a few months old, and she was never seen or heard from again. Allison was adamant about learning what had become of Holly, but it seemed like an overwhelming task. Investigators began a thorough national search for Holly because they were driven to learn the truth, but they had to first figure out how to spell her name. Although some detectives dismissed it as a minor problem, Allison Peacock knew that getting the name correct was essential to locating her. Allison and Harold's sister asked for access to her birth record from Florida's Department of Vital Records to determine the proper spelling, but they were turned down. This started a difficult and uphill battle, in which the authorities rejected each request for the record. Peacock and her group, though, were unyielding. Before eventually receiving access to Holly's birth certificate, investigators worked their way up the ranks of those involved in the case, from detectives to senior prosecutors, judges, and finally, attorney generals from 3 different states. They soon learned that Holly had been adopted by a family nearby. She had grown up and was going about her life. Completely oblivious to her disastrous past, Holly's birth certificate was sealed in the United States, which is why it was difficult to obtain. Following an adoption, it is common practice to seal birth certificates, making it challenging to obtain a copy of the record, except through a court order. This also implies that the birth certificate is accompanied by an adoption certificate. It was Allison Peacock's unwavering persistence in locating Holly's name's proper spelling that allowed for the eventual acquisition of the birth certificate. Whether it was merely a coincidence or a deliberate action is unknown. But the truth is that Holly might not have been found without Allison's commendable efforts. After this discovery, the police descended on Holly's workplace and learned her origin story, which they had painstakingly uncovered from a maze of lost paperwork and neglected archives. Holly, Harold and Tina's daughter, who is now 42 and a mother of 5 who lives in Oklahoma, was finally reunited with her remaining biological family as the investigators continued to delve deeper into the mysterious case of Harold and Tina. Everyone involved was happy and relieved because they had long given up on ever finding her. But there are still many unanswered questions about the circumstances surrounding her adoption. The case was far from over, despite the excitement of the moment. Holly's parents were murdered, and the identity of the murderer is still a mystery, as are the circumstances surrounding Holly's adoption. Investigators soon found out that 2 women who belonged to a nomadic religious group had left Holly at a church in Arizona. These women were barefoot and wore robes. Their religion remained a mystery because the officials were reluctant to provide any information. However, they did reveal that the group believed in veganism and thought that men and women should be kept apart. The religious group is known to have visited Arizona, California, and possibly Texas while touring the southern United States. The group was reportedly seen in the early 1980s around Yuma, Arizona, with its female members begging for food. The case appeared to have all the elements of a classic detective story. With plenty of leads to pursue but no obvious solutions, Holly's amazing discovery had only raised more issues and led to dead ends. With no clear solution in sight, Holly's extraordinary discovery had untangled a thread that led down a maze of questions. Her complicated adoption history started to come into focus as the murky role of a roving religious sect became clear. Detectives nevertheless reaffirmed their dedication to the investigation. strengthened by their belief that the religious organization was the key to cracking this unsolved case. They showed firm commitment to uncovering the truth in order to bring Holly and her biological roots some form of justice. We are faced with an unknown that is full of enticing secrets that are just waiting to be revealed. We wait for shocking revelations, the echoes of the past growing louder with each passing moment. This investigation into the history of the mysterious and unsolved has only just begun, so there is still much to learn. On June 15, 2023, Chad Dorman returned home early from work and requested that his 3 sons and wife join him in the primary bedroom for a nap. Sometime after they lay down on the bed, Dorman opened his gun safe and retrieved a rifle. Dorman then shot Hunter twice, killing him. His wife began trying to help Hunter while telling the other 2 sons to run. At this point, the stepdaughter, who was watching television, was entering the bedroom and witnessed the first shots. She ran after Clayton, telling him to keep running. Dorman chased him into a nearby field, shot him from behind, and then point blank in the head. The suspect carried Clayton's body back to the house's yard. The stepdaughter then re-entered the house, picked up Chase, and escaped to the road. Dorman followed her and aimed the rifle at her, telling her to put Chase down. He tried to fire but was out of ammunition. Chase ran to his mother, who was now outside in the yard trying to render aid to Clayton. The stepdaughter got away and informed a passerby what her stepfather was doing before continuing to run towards the nearby Monroe Township Fire Department. Dorman then went inside and carried Hunter's body outside, laying him in the yard. He then tried to wrestle Chase from his wife, reportedly biting her in the process. When she managed to grab the rifle, Dorman fired, shooting his wife in the thumb. She dropped Chase, whom Dorman then shot in the head. Dorman then laid Chase's body down next to his brother's and sat on the side stoop of the house, watching his wife try to resuscitate the boys until police arrived at 4:25 p.m. Chad Dorman was born in 1990 in Ohio, USA, and was the cherished only child of Kit and Gloria Dorman. From the start, he was the apple of their eye. Chad had what you'd call a normal childhood. His family was middle class, so he managed to get through elementary and high school without any major issues. He wasn't exactly a standout student, but he got by, passing his classes and staying out of trouble. However, things took a turn once Chad hit adulthood. He started drinking heavily and driving recklessly, which led to numerous traffic tickets and fines. At one point, he even crashed his car and fled the scene, ignoring multiple court summons. The real wake-up call came in 2010 when Chad was accused of domestic violence against his own father. Despite the charges, his father refused to testify against him, not wanting to see his son in trouble, so the case was dismissed. But history repeated itself, as Chad faced another domestic violence accusation, this time from a partner. Like before, the case went nowhere because no one would support the charges, holding on to hope that Chad would change. And change he did, at least for a while after meeting Laura. He fell head over heels for her. Unfazed by her having a daughter, Alexis, from a previous marriage, they soon started a life together, moving to a residential neighborhood in Monroe, Claremont County. The family grew with the arrival of 3 sons, Clayton, Hunter, and Chase. By early 2023, Chad was 32, Laura was 34, Alexis was 16, and the boys were 7, 4, and 3 years old, respectively. The Dormans settled nicely into their peaceful community. In their free time, Clayton and Hunter loved playing baseball. Their coach really liked them and always talked about how energetic and happy they were during practice. He described Hunter as a natural prankster and Clayton as the more serious one, always focused on getting the plays right and cheering on the team. Though both boys shared a love for sports, their other interests varied. Clayton enjoyed building with Lego, riding his go-kart, playing with his dog, and especially taking care of his younger brothers. Hunter, the more adventurous one, was often found playing in the yard, splashing in the creek, or bouncing on the trampoline, always showing lots of affection. Every day, he would tell his mom and sister how much he loved them. Even though Chase was very young, he had already shown a vivid imagination, spending most of his day pretending to be a superhero. The rest of the time, he was glued to Laura, sharing a special bond. The community often spoke of how close the Dorman family was, amazed by their strong connection and shared moments. Yet, behind closed doors, things were quite different. Neighbors frequently heard Chad yelling at Laura and the kids, with hardly a day passing without some outburst. Close friends noticed the situation deteriorating, describing Chad as a ticking time bomb. The abuse escalated to the point where Laura threatened to leave. Despite the turmoil at home, Chad tried to keep up appearances publicly. In June 2023, he updated his Facebook profile picture to one featuring the three kids and followed up with more posts, including one from the baseball field where Clayton, Hunter, and Chase gave thumbs up, suggesting all was well. At the time, the photo raised no alarms and seemed to depict a happy family scene. Those aware of Chad's abusive behavior chose not to intervene, hoping the family situation was improving. On Wednesday, the 14th of the month, the kids had a baseball game. Chad, Laura, and Chase came to support them. After the game, the head of New Richmond Sports Association noticed Chad interacting with the kids, instructing them to get into their car seats, seemingly caring and responsible, which left no suspicion about his true nature. Unbeknownst to everyone, that would be the last time the children were seen alive. The next day, Chad came home early from work and asked his wife and children to join him in the master bedroom for a nap. While the rest of the family was sleeping in the master bedroom, Chad's 16-year-old stepdaughter was watching television in the family room. Once they were all asleep, Chad opened his nightstand drawer, revealing a safe from which he retrieved a rifle. He woke the three children and lined them up with Hunter in front. What followed was a horrifying tragedy. Dorman shot Hunter twice, killing him. Laura was awakened by the noise and started screaming in horror. She rushed to Hunter's side and urged her other two sons to run. Meanwhile, Alexis, in the next room watching TV, heard the gunshots and ran into the bedroom. She saw her stepfather chasing Clayton and started running after them. The boy raced to a nearby field, but despite his speed, Chad caught up with him, treating it like a hunt. He then shot the boy as he ran, causing him to fall and allowing more time to shoot him again at close range. He then carried the lifeless body back to the house. After witnessing this, Alexis rushed inside to grab Chase, hoping to save him. Her plan was to head for the nearest road, but they never made it out of the house because Chad caught up again. He told Alexis to put down Chase, but she refused. Chad tried to shoot, but the gun clicked, empty of bullets. Just then, Laura appeared in the yard, trying desperately to revive Clayton but to no avail. Alexis put Chase down, telling him to run to their mother, saying she would go for help. The little boy ran to Laura's arms for safety. Meanwhile, Chad went back inside to reload his gun and came back to grab his son Hunter. After leaving Hunter in the yard, he tried to snatch Chase from Laura. They struggled, and Chad bit Laura's hand before shooting her in the same spot. She dropped Chase and Chad took him. He then shot the boy in the head. Satisfied with his actions, Chad placed Chase beside his brothers and sat on the side porch, sinisterly watching as his wife tried in vain to revive the children. It was 4:14 p.m. when Laura realized there was nothing more she could do. She called the police, hysterically screaming that she had lost her babies. The father had fired 9 shots. One boy was shot once and the other 2 were each shot 4 times. Meanwhile, Alexis was running towards the Monroe fire station, screaming for help. A neighbor driving by stopped to ask what had happened. Alexis told her that her stepfather had killed everyone at home. The neighbor offered to take her in the car, but Alexis refused, saying she couldn't leave her family behind and continued running towards the fire station. The neighbor parked and called the police, recounting Alexis' story. When asked if she could check on the house, she said she didn't want to get close, fearing she might be shot too. By this time, 911 operators had received 2 calls about the incident and had alerted the officers who rushed to the Dorman residence. The neighbors, having heard the shots, were in their yards trying to see what had happened, unaware of the full extent of the tragedy. At 4:30 p.m., the police arrived at the scene. They found Chad calmly sitting on a step outside, rifle in hand, soberly stating he wasn't going to resist arrest and admitting to the crimes, insisting they take him to jail. In this gripping footage from the police body camera, we witness the moment law enforcement apprehends Chad Dorman. The scene unfolds with palpable tension as officers approach, capturing the crucial interaction that led to his arrest. Despite the calm exterior he presents, the gravity of the situation is evident. While Chad was detained, the immediate focus shifted to the 3 children who were found lying in the yard with gunshot wounds. Paramedics tried to perform CPR, but to no avail. Within minutes, the tragic deaths of the children were confirmed. Attention then turned to Laura, who had a gunshot wound to her hand, not life-threatening. She was rushed to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center, screaming at Chad that he had destroyed her life as she was loaded into the ambulance. Chad was arrested smoothly, but as he was about to be placed in the patrol car, he bizarrely warned the arresting officers about the family dog and told the pet to go back inside the house. The property was cordoned off with yellow tape as officers planned to return the next day for a thorough investigation. That night, Chad was charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder. When investigators returned to the house the next morning, they found no signs of forced entry, indicating Chad acted alone. In his initial statement, Chad chillingly admitted to having planned the attack on his children since the previous October and revealed he hadn't slept for 3 days leading up to the crime, tormented by the thought of killing his children. On June 16th, Chad made his first court appearance, wearing a padded green vest designed to prevent self-harm, flanked by 6 deputies, indicating concerns he might become unruly. During the hearing, he admitted to lining up his 3 children before killing them. Neighbors' testimonies were presented, with one witnessing Clayton's attempt to escape from Chad. The evidence overwhelmingly pointed to Chad's guilt. His defense requested a $75,000 bail, arguing his long-standing relationship with Laura, lack of stable employment, and community ties made him a low-flight risk. However, prosecutors demanded a $20 million bail, a record-high amount in Ohio, effectively ensuring Chad could not be released. The judge agreed with the prosecution. The criminal division of the Claremont County Prosecutor's Office expressed that this was the worst crime he had encountered, condemning Chad's betrayal of his children's trust and need for protection, love, and guidance. He highlighted the brutality of Chad's actions, particularly when he hunted down Clayton. He also criticized the community for ignoring Chad's violent tendencies. The hearing concluded with Chad facing 9 counts of aggravated murder, 1 for each shot fired at his children, plus 8 counts of kidnapping and 4 counts of assault. He was remanded to Claremont County Jail as the investigation continued. On June 23rd, a grand jury indicted Chad on 21 counts, stirring outrage when he pleaded not guilty. Claremont County's prosecutor mentioned that the aggravated murder charges could lead to the death penalty. He argued for the elimination of bail, claiming no sum could match the atrocity of the crime. The case had already garnered extensive media attention, with crowds outside the courthouse demanding swift justice and calling for severe punishment for Chad. Public opinion varied after the hearing. Some agreed with the prosecutor's stance on the death penalty, while others advocated for life imprisonment, insisting Chad fully face the consequences of his actions. However, the consensus was clear. Chad deserved severe punishment. Despite the nationwide backlash, Chad's father still supported him, expressing shock and sorrow in an interview, attempting to rationalize his son's actions as a sudden madness, contradicting Chad's admission of premeditated planning. In contrast, Laura and her family grappled with the fallout. Alexis needed psychological support due to the trauma, and Rachel, the children's aunt, initiated a GoFundMe campaign to cover funeral expenses. She expressed that while the trial might convict Chad, it wouldn't mend their broken hearts, leaving them only memories of the joyful children they once had. On June 25th, the New Richmond Sports Association held a vigil at the baseball field, selling t-shirts to aid Laura's family. Community members visited the Dorman home, leaving toys, candles, and flowers in tribute to the children. A service was held on June 26th at the First Baptist Church for the kids. Laura asked everyone to wear bright, colorful clothes to remember her sons happily. But even with the cheerful colors, you could feel the deep sadness, especially with their friends who just couldn't make sense of the terrible event. During the service, the coach spoke, emphasizing the irreplaceable time spent with the boys and cherishing every moment shared with them. On September 22nd, a pre-trial hearing for Chad was held, setting the trial date for July 8, 2024, expected to last until August 12th of the same year. It was decided that Chad would remain in custody at the Claremont County Jail, with his bail set at $20 million. To this day, the motive behind the crime remains a mystery. No one knows what truly drove Chad to kill his 3 children. Some media suggest he might have been seeking revenge against Laura, who planned to leave him due to his violent behavior towards her and the children. However, Chad has not addressed this theory and continues to withhold cooperation with the investigation. In February 2024, during a court session, Chad Dorman's lawyers requested the judge to dismiss the statements Chad made during his questioning due to certain legal problems and violations. The judge agreed and decided not to consider the confessions Chad made to the police, where he admitted to killing his 3 sons. The judge believed that Chad's rights were not respected after he was arrested. 22-year-old Christopher Hervey lived in Santa Ana, California in 1996. His girlfriend, Jade Benning, lived with him and she was also 22 years old. At 3 a.m. on January 4, 1996, Jade called 911. She said that a man broke into their apartment and fatally stabbed Christopher. According to her, she suffered a minor cut to her right hand when she struggled with the intruder. A witness also told police they saw a man running from the apartment building. Investigators discovered Christopher's body with multiple wounds to his chest. They couldn't find the weapon anywhere. Neighbors told police how they heard a loud argument taking place shortly before Christopher was stabbed, lasting for around 15 minutes. Investigators continued to work the case, but their leads went cold until an anonymous letter arrived in January 2020 that implicated Benning in the case. A cold case detective believed there to be enough after following up on the case, and obtained a criminal complaint from the Orange County District Attorney's Office together with a warrant for Benning's arrest. 48-year-old Jade Manda Benning, who now lives in Austin, Texas, was arrested on May 3, 2022, near her home after an investigation that involved forensics. Agents from the U.S. Marshals Lone Star Fugitive Task Force arrested her. Detectives from the Santa Ana Police Department were also present to witness Benning being apprehended. She had been extradited to California to face the charges, and she is being held on a $1 million bail. We don't know exactly what led to the arrest, but we do know that evidence against her includes something police found when they executed search warrants in Austin, Texas in June 2020. Benning is currently in Orange County Jail. Her arraignment is scheduled for June 8, 2022. On December 11, 1985, firefighters were called to a reported fire at a townhouse in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. They found the only thing on fire was 38-year-old Lynn Amos, who had third-degree burns over 80% of her body and was lying unconscious in her bed. She was taken to a nearby hospital, where she sadly passed away 10 days later on December 21st. Investigators originally thought she had died after accidentally setting herself on fire from smoking in bed. However, according to her family, she was not a smoker, and investigators found no traces in her home that she ever had been. After a toxicology report was performed, they found her blood alcohol level was at 0.25%, which is almost impossible. Lynn would have had to consume 9 to 14 drinks in the span of 1 hour to reach that blood alcohol level. When insurance investigators examined the room where Lynn was found, they discovered the mattress, pillow, and floor had been doused in some kind of accelerant. Further testing revealed the accelerant used was a mixture of kerosene, gasoline, and turpentine. Now that investigators knew the fire was set intentionally, her death was officially ruled a homicide. When investigators began looking into who might have killed Lynn, they discovered she worked as a financial consultant for a management consulting firm, where she was involved in investigating Mexican banks. During her investigations, she had discovered seriously flawed lending practices that would reflect poorly on the Mexican banks. While she never discussed specifics with anyone about her investigations, she had mentioned to some friends over brunch that she had seen some dangerous things during her work in Mexico. Lynn was last heard from at 10 p.m. that night when she called her office, claiming that she would be late for work the next day. Her friends and family believed that sometime after midnight, her killer broke into her home and killed her. Because there were no signs of forced entry, the killer may have had a key. They speculate that the killer forced her to drink enough alcohol to render her unconscious. The killer then spread the flammable substances on her bed and body and set her on fire. Lynn's friends speculated that she may have found something related to drug money or fraudulent loans. Her family's attorney believes that her death was a professional hit. Interestingly, her reports on the banks were never finished, and as of today, this case remains unsolved.